now to Barbara Slavin. She's a distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center here in Washington, D.C., focusing on the Middle East and North Africa. Barbara, thank you so much for coming in and chatting. We've talked a lot about what's going on now in Gaza, but you've talked a bit on social media and in reports about the focus, and you believe that Qatar could be a significant key in a ceasefire. I'm curious your take on that situation now, considering how grim everything is in Gaza.
Yeah, everything is very grim. Look, Secretary of State Tony Blinken just spoke with the Qataris, I believe, today. They are key in a number of ways. First and foremost, in terms of getting the release of some 240 hostages, which are being held by Hamas in Gaza, most of them Israeli, some of them foreign nationals as well. And Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu has said that there will be no ceasefire until, at a minimum, these hostages are freed. So I think these are very, very delicate negotiations that are going on with the Qataris acting as the mediators because, of course, Hamas has political leadership based in Doha.
Yeah. You know, today, Netanyahu was quoted as saying it's very difficult, impossible to tell how many of the hostages are still alive. Clearly, that is the link to some kind of ceasefire in all of this. What are your concerns about that statement, and what do you think we're going to learn moving forward about these hostages, and how difficult is it going to be to silence all these guns and all the bombing?
Well, it seems that the Israelis are not prioritizing hostage release right now. They are prioritizing hitting Hamas, getting rid of Hamas tunnels. Netanyahu made it very clear that Hamas is not to be in charge of the Gaza Strip any longer, and that what happened to the Israelis on October 7th must never happen again. So that does seem to be the priority. At the same time, there are miles and miles of these tunnels and underground chambers of various sorts. It's believed hostages are being held in them, perhaps scattered all through the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And it's just impossible to know how many of them are still alive, what their condition is. But the fact that the Qataris are still working this, that the U.S. is still involved, suggests that hopefully many of these people are alive, and that there will be some sort of agreement at some point for their release in return for a ceasefire in Gaza, an end to this endless bombing, and probably the release of some of the thousands of Palestinian prisoners who are being held by the Israelis.
Yeah, indeed. Even as we talk about that, more hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel, and fighting also escalating along the West Bank, as we heard in our very excellent story at the top of our program from Sam Mednick. So what is going to stop this from becoming a full-blown regional war?
Well, you know, if you look at the results of the summit that was held in Saudi Arabia on Saturday, I don't think the region as a whole wants a wider war. I think that's quite clear, and that there is a lot of effort being made to contain this. Now, it's obviously not completely successful because we have seen these interactions between the Israelis and Hezbollah in Lebanon. The problems on the West Bank, frankly, predate October 7th. Has been an aggressive push by Israeli settlers with the support of the right-wing Bibi Netanyahu government to push Palestinians off their land, prevent them from harvesting olives, etc. So that, alas alack, is nothing new, but it's intensified with the Gaza war as kind of a cover for it. But overall, the conflict has not expanded in the way that it might have. And I think the focus has to remain on protecting civilians to the extent possible in Gaza, getting as many of them as possible out of harm's way, freeing the hostages, and convincing the Israelis that this operation of theirs in the Gaza Strip cannot go on for much longer. The death toll is simply too high. You know, over what, 11,000 killed now, most of them civilians. And
most
that
women and children, actually.
A number of UN workers as well, over 100 Gazans working for the United Nations have been killed. So this is just, it's untenable. I think the Israelis know this. We've seen a change in tone on the part of the Biden administration as well. And so I hope and pray that this will not go on much longer.
Barbara, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to go back to protecting civilians, protecting aid workers, and Israel's the mounting death toll. You tweeted, if I can still use that term, or wrote on X, that the fighting between Israel and Hamas is challenging the notion that Arab states could rely on a U.S.-led security alliance in the Persian Gulf. What do you mean by that?
Well, actually, I was referring to a piece that was written by some Iranian academics, which is up on the Stimson Center website. We have a blog called Middle East Voices. And what they wrote, and I think, frankly, accurately, is that this war has sort of blown apart the idea that Israel could bypass the Palestinians and form agreements, normalization with key Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, and the United States, in a sort of anti-Iran alliance, an alliance against Iran and the various groups that Iran supports. I think what we've seen is that unless there is some way to bring these factions and Iran into a security arrangement and give the Palestinians some form of sovereignty, you're not going to be able to bring stability to the Middle East.
And those relations are certainly heading south. Barbara Slavin, we thank you very much for your insight as always. Thank you.
Thank you.